we'll officially start the day. Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Cleghorn here, and I've hit the record button, so it's always a good sign. So today we're on part 4 of the survival guide for photographers. It's a big one today in some ways, because I'm asking probably a question that so many don't really want to ask or even talk about, and I've got to ask it. Is it worth staying in business after all this pandemic has come and gone? I mean, that's a question probably a good percentage of you online are thinking at this point. I'm going to go through it all, and obviously you're here to make your own decision whether it is worth to actually stay in business or not. I'm going to give you my kind of input at the end as far as what I feel as far as the short and the long term is concerned. But as far as this section is concerned, obviously just get the questions in for us. If you haven't managed to watch any of the part 1, 2, 3s yet, okay, please go and watch part 1, because we asked the question, how do I survive the shutdown and what do I do on restart? We've answered so many questions in part 1. We didn't pull any punches. We didn't hang on for the next 6 weeks trying to get you to actually stay in touch with us and kind of, you know, hold it all out until the good stuff at the end. We are honestly delivering you a section every single time that will change your business. But the session 1 we did, I wanted to answer a lot of questions straight away. Session 2, those who have joined us know that we did a specific one on just wedding photography. And then in session 3, we looked at the money side of things, the real finances, where we had those horrible things called spreadsheets up and kind of began to actually look at monies and so on. Of course, last week in the UK, we saw a major announcement about the bounce back loans from the UK government for small businesses and so on. My same advice would be just don't take out the loan full stop. Make sure you can afford to repay it is number 1 on the agenda of any kind of finance loans and so on. And I would probably say that you should at least touch base with your accountant, even though I'm absolutely assured that if you are going to take out a loan, it's probably the cheapest loan you're ever going to get, because it's interest-free for a whole year, and then it's only 2.5% with no fees or anything else involved for the remaining 5 to 6 years, or however long you decide to take it up upon. But you must take that advice from your accountant. I cannot give you that advice. I can talk like we're sat in a pub and we're actually mates around kind of giving each other that kind of advice. Even within our experience group, to be honest, I still talk to them that they have to actually get that kind of advice, even though I'm insured for £20 million for wrong advice. Basically, I still will, you know, recommend that you seek out that professional in their own kind of circles, because that's what they do. So go back if you haven't had a chance and actually look at number 1 anyway. So, is it worth staying in business? That's the question. Because we're only weeks away now from restarting our businesses. At least that's what we hope and we've been planning for. But what are going to be the long-term effects on the business? I suppose that for me as an employee, employer, I should say, of quite a lot of people, I have to look at. It's no good saying, well, yeah, we can survive till Christmas, or we can do this and so on. But we need to make sure that we're looking at the longer term effects, and that includes taxation, pensions, holidays, staffing, increasing the staffing. And basically what I'm really looking at is how do we, as far as Mark Cleghorn is concerned, look at the long-term effects of the business, first of all, i.e. photography, and then how do we look at it as far as the short-term effects, and will that actually be able to survive to the long term? I like to reverse engineer stuff. Instead of just looking at, okay, I need this now, and I'll worry about this then, I tend to actually try and work all the way forward, and basically then make those decisions coming backwards of what we're going to do and so on. So I'm really missing my administration staff here in the office, and we've already been in touch with them over the past few weeks, seeing and discussing if they do want to come back. Obviously, that's a question I've got to ask. I can't presume that just because I furloughed the administration staff from the academy that they're going to be coming back. And basically, when is going to be good for them? So I've got to also look at that kind of planning stage, because obviously these are people with families who might be exposed, and they don't want to actually let themselves be exposed to possible infection. They might have kids stuck at home or parents stuck at home and so on. So there's going to be lots of little things that we have to actually ask ourselves. But it's not just about ourselves. We have to think about others before ourselves, because that's the only real way that we can long-term kind of plan. So for some studios, they probably got rid of staff that they either didn't need or didn't want, or they were self-employed. So they cut deep, cut hard once, which is always recession tactics. And basically, they're going to be looking at now, how and when do I need to actually be bringing those people back, if I can afford to actually bring those back at all within things really. So what we're trying to address today is how are we going to actually be able to answer the question at the end of today, is it worth to maintain the business running, and can we sustain it? Because don't forget, what we're doing now will affect the long term, okay? So if we're too slow to react, the long term might be too late. If we're too fast to react, it could knee jerk against us, we lose momentum, and basically we're not ready to actually take on to the second phase and the third phase and so on. In the UK yesterday or last night, our Prime Minister gave us their kind of basic kind of what is happening as far as the plans were concerned. In Wales, we had ours last week from our Senedd, and Scotland had their own from their Parliament. So basically, we have a slightly different business control than you do in England, perhaps, and in Scotland, perhaps, and so on. But no matter whatever we're doing, including these politicians to us, whatever they're doing to us, it is affecting the long term. And I can absolutely guarantee you, they need us as self-employed and employers of employees. In other words, those people, those small businesses that 95% of Britain is made up of, they need us back to work. They need us to earn our money, and they're not keeping us at home for a reason. And over the past weeks, we've talked about the difference between, you know, the self-employed and a director of a company or companies like I am. And I made the decision that it was more productive for me to be in business and working and actually making sure that the likes of the academy was actually still running, because obviously it's an online training company. We're 11 years old, so we should survive. However, we all get affected by different things, by YouTube and other offers, and people deciding that they can't afford to actually resubscribe for another year. We all get affected. In the same way, though, I made the bigger decision that I wasn't going to be furloughing myself, because I believe that my experienced photographers, they needed me now more than ever. So they needed somebody here that was also going to listen and support, but also was there to actually help them planning. And that's the key thing that I need you to actually try and find where you are in your business model at this point, whether you are just about to get going. If so, I would probably still recommend that you've got an income coming through. So don't give up an income that you have if you're employed by another company. If you made that commitment and you've basically become self-employed, obviously, if you need to furlough yourself, you know if you need that monies or not with it, and I'm okay with that. But if you are a director of a company, of course, remember, you cannot work if you furloughed yourself. The only thing you're allowed to do is accounts. So if I'm self-employed and I can work, the first things that I really need to be doing is basically to ensure that at what level am I at? If I've been in business for a long time and looking at reinitiating leads, reinitiating all my marketing, and when is going to be my D-Day, my press that button, and development day, that button's pressed and we go. If I'm a photographer who's probably been going for the past 1 or 5 years, and remember most businesses close within 5 years anyway of all sectors, So you're probably actually going, this question, can I really survive? Is it worth going on? If it was a bit, dicky beforehand, is it just going to get worse from here and things really? And those are the kind of probably the biggest problem people with business questions there is the person who's been running a business from say 2 to 4 years, because your spanners have just been all thrown away and you don't actually know how to start things up. That engine needs to start, and that's obviously what we're here to help you with. Then you've basically got the other sector who's just got the business going. You're going to be in a painful barrier, of course, because if you started this year, most of you won't be able to actually get any furlough money or whatever it is and things really. There might be small business grants out there and so on, but what you will be doing is basically be able to really now turn the rev up very, very, very fast on your engine. You have to get going as fast as you can. We are not going to allow procrastination the other side of this, okay? So, we've got to face some facts here, okay? Because this is the almost negative out of all of this series that we're doing. And I'm not going to apologize for it, but we have to hit this nail on the head. We have to, all right? Being self-employed isn't for everyone. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You might have tried and you've been there and it hasn't worked out from you. And you might be making that decision and you go, that's it, I've had enough. I'm okay with that. Just don't waste my time when we talk to each other on saying why it didn't work. You are the only one who needs to know why your business didn't work. If you decide to close your door or stop operating as a professional photographer, I'm okay with that, I promise you. But what I don't like is excuses. And many will be using the pandemic here and the lockdown and so on as the excuse to close their door. And some will be absolutely closing their door and it's the last thing they ever want to do. But in fact, others will be giving up because they've basically just given up. As I said, and if we do get to chat on a forum stage at any point, then all I'm asking you to do is don't bore me with your details. I know that sounds terrible for me to say it out loud, but I honestly mean it. I have more time for people who are fighters than I do people who basically throw in a towel. And I'm sorry if I offend anybody with that, but that's just me and my mechanic, me and my body, me and my head and so on. And basically I find much more energy being able to actually fight for things than actually pass over. Look, I've been leaving home at 7 AM and I come into work, I walk the dog and I'm here by 8 o'clock and I work here till 6 o'clock and I go home and I do 7 o'clock and blah, blah, blah. And even with all blood, sweat and tears, because many of you might be doing exactly that same thing, okay? But even all that blood, sweat and tears does not make a bad business good, as you can see on screen. And that's the real heartache, I think, is when you sit back in your chair, and this is the guy who's just said, don't bore me with all your tears. But because I wear my heart on my sleeve, I'm okay with you going, Mark, I did everything in my power. I did everything in my power to keep that business running. I accept that. But what we've got to do as well is still make smart decisions. So what else can I do? I mean, I'm a butcher's son. I came out of school with my A levels and I didn't go to Art College as planned to do three-dimensional design. I went to work for a photographer during the summer, never left him, basically opened up my own studio up then in the late 80s and basically, done it ever since. I know nothing else. But if I stop being a photographer today, ignore about consultancy and training and all that kind of stuff, all right? But if I gave up photography today, there's nothing else I could physically do. So I know nothing else. I'm only bred to be a photographer. I know that in my heart. I went out this morning on my walk with the dog and I took pictures and I stopped people at a distance and I said, excuse me, can I take your photograph? And I met a little old woman basically who had a mask on and the gloves on and a little kind of shopping trolley, and she was waiting outside her flats. And I said, excuse me, do you mind if I take your photograph? And she said, well, what for? I said, I'm just doing some documentary photography, that's okay. She said, yeah, please just do this. So I can't see her anyway. She's got her sunglasses on as well. And I took some photographs. I'm chatting away with her as I would in normal kind of street photography or people, commercial photography. And I'm chatting away with her and everything else. She said, you know what? This is the first time in 2 months I've gone out and I've got to go to get food. And the reason being is that I'm running low on food and I can't get another food drop off till next week. And I took the photograph and I chatted with her and everything else. And I got back in the van and I drive into the studio with it. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, Mark Cleghorn, you haven't been a Christian here. You should have actually asked her if she wants you to go for her, and she can go back into her flat and everything else with it. And since 7:45 this morning, that little old woman has been on my mind every single 5 to 10 minutes, and I can't get it out of my head. And that's like business. That when you've made a wrong decision or you question the decision that you should have done and you haven't done, you kind of regret it. And if I hadn't stopped that woman to ask a photograph, to take a photograph this morning, I'm sure there'd be another analogy that I'd be using at this point to do with that blood, sweat, and tears. But it happens, and I'm okay with that part, as long as you show you really did put 100% in there, and that's the only thing that you can do to your own heart and your own head. You haven't got to prove that to me. You haven't got to prove it to anyone else. Your loved ones will already know because they see the passion that you're actually putting into it. But as far as that effort is concerned, in your heart, if you do decide that you're actually going to shut down your business with it, then you know you've done your best. You know that you could have done no more. You didn't sit on your butt or painted the fence or done things, wasted time on social media in when you could have been actually doing something active within the business as such, really. So with that in mind, photography is a very, very lonely place. And I would say that one of the things that many of the photographers who've joined the experience and have been to workshops that I've done over the years and things really, that basically you're not alone. You get to meet other photographers, you get to meet other like-minded people. And I've got to say that our experience group, before all this crap has happened, was tight. Online, Facebook, social groups and everything else, but they were tight. They help each other, they support each other, they're involved with each other, they don't mind the stupid questions from people who are new, they even ask stupid questions themselves, and they put their own hearts out there on their own sleeves, as it were. But you know what, during this time, we've been basically meeting each week with each of the individual groups for an hour, which usually develops into two hours or beyond, as some of them will be able to tell you with it. And the whole point of that is so you don't feel alone. And they've become a tighter family, I believe, than ever before. And yes, when we were announced that the lockdown was going to happen, I was concerned about a percentage of the group being able to actually get through the other end, because they might have been one of those who just got going, or they've only just got going, or they're about to get going, and things really, and so on. And it feels very lonely out there. And all I can promise is that just talk to people, whether they're in your industry or not, but be very careful to listen for advice from people who don't know you and your business, because you don't know that their businesses aren't failing as well. I've seen that so many times in my career, where other photographers are giving other photographers advice, not knowing that those photographers were just about to go through as well, and basically they have no idea. And the whole point is be aware of false prophets, and I talked about that quite a lot of things really. But as far as the feeling alone is concerned, voice things, talk about it, but be positive in everything. You cannot change the negatives. You know the negatives. You've looked at things, you go, I need to change this. How do I change this? You make roads into changing it, but then you have to actually develop it into a positive. So on the business front, if you weren't very social before, you're definitely more social media led now. If you weren't very community led in your business before, you definitely are now looking more at your communities. There are things that have had the seesaw effect within what's gone on. And basically, I can absolutely promise you that you should feel at this stage that you are not alone in this kind of problem. because we're all in this together, and you will have been talking to like-minded photographers as well, I hope. But really take what they're saying to you as a kind of an educated implementation. The positivity, I think, is the hard thing. I think we all suffer from that self-doubt. You could say it's an artistic thing. You could say it's a business inexperience. You could use the excuses, well, I've never done this before, you know, blah, blah, whatever it is. But as far as the positive is concerned, I find that is much more, it gets me through the day, the weeks, the years, and so on when things are tough. Especially things when they're financially tough, or their relationship tough, or you're feeling a little bit burned out from it, health-wise, and so on. But if you can actually find the positive in the thing, so in other words, if you feel today that your photography was not really accepted in the same way as you thought how good you were, you've got a chance to change this and develop it ready for the restart. So these are all things that you have the ability to do now. If your website needed tidying up, then this is the time that we've discussed already that you can be doing. But we're here to make a decision, Rebecca. Is it worth staying in business? That's what we're really trying to address during this session today, and you are the only one. Okay, it's there at the bottom, and I mean this sincerely with it, but you are the only one who can pick yourself up and get restarted at this point. There is nobody else out there that can make you do something. I've just been writing or finalizing my presentations for this week for my group, my experience groups, and you know, I've basically been nagging them, encouraging them, telling them, advising them, all those words, whatever they are, the same, but it still needs them to do it. And you are the one that I hope we're going to brush, when we're allowed to brush past each other, we're going to brush past each other, and you're going, cheers, Mark. You did it today for me. Whatever it was, I don't know what it'll be. I'll never remember it, I promise you. I'm terrible with names. I'm great with faces with it. But I hope at some stage, through what we're doing with both the Academy and with these actually survival guides, that will make or encourage more of you to actually stick at this, possibly than we would have been actually looking at. If you're a photographer who's going to be, or if you're a person who's about to lose their job and you're looking at photography as a new start, I would say that's going to be a really hard task for me to actually do. But again, we have systems, we have plans, we have the kind of the training course to make sure that you're putting A and B and C together and so on. But it still takes you to do all these things. Let's not forget that. There's no fairy dust, as we keep saying. How can the business readjust itself to meet the new normal? Because if you think we're going to go into business as was in the next phase, as it were, so in other words, we're going to pick up where we left off, we ain't going to be doing that. We are going to see a big recession. We know that in some way. It could be long or short, depending on the unemployment rate, but we know there is going to be a huge spike. The government are telling us in advance. I mean, you've got common sense, you know about that. But when we're looking at our businesses, we're going to have to actually just readjust north. We're going to have to readjust the standard in what we base our business on all the time. So I've promised my group I'm not going to talk about averages in sales until in January, because everything I do to do with the experience group is we talk about average sales, not average sales across the whole group, but average sales to that person, that one photographer, because every single photography business is different. If you think that everybody is the same in this world, you're absolutely wrong, and that includes the business with it. You know, some, even though they might have been going for 5+ years, still don't have the comfort, the belief in themselves to actually put their prices up, to actually make sure that they're talking about their brand. They still think perhaps like a shoot and burn photographer, where they're selling themselves short a little bit and things really. And often, when we start to actually analyze things, and this is, you know, when people join our experience group, I still get a one-to-one session with them within a few weeks or months, depends on them. But we start to actually focus in on the priorities. And this is where probably most businesses, not just photographers, but most businesses lose out on, is because they confuse themselves. They basically look at the least important things, and for some reason they think it's the most important, and they basically sideline everything else. Pricing, your products are the most essential element in what we do, because we're professionals who sell things. And if we think we're going to be able to continue to earn decent salaries from just selling digital files in the short term, then basically we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot in the long term. And so continuing to sell, but looking at how we sell in a different way, has to be something that we look at. Perhaps the photography that you've been doing is going to have to change itself a little bit. You're going to have to actually bend a little bit, morph a little bit. So you might be photographing in different styles, even different genres that you've never done before, or you're having to because it's associated to the side brand. I would think specifically at the makeover and the boudoir photographers, they are the ones who are going to be hit quite considerably. Because of they're going to be like hairdressers or dentists, where clients have to actually be in a touch circumstance instead of a 2-meter scenario. Even one of the styles that I shoot, I'm basically stood on a ladder above the client. It means that I can't be doing that specific style in that specific way, because obviously my feet would still be within 6 feet of the client. And does that conform to legislations wherever we are in the world and things really? So there is a whole new rejig of north, and that's where you have to start to analyze now completely how you're going to change the business to meet the new restrictions and to obviously meet the new scenarios and so on. So little bit of just, let's make sure you're concentrating now on the priorities. And the priorities, I would say, this week are looking at these next few weeks of how we're going to actually adjust the way that we photograph. We talked about this quite a lot, actually, as far as the wedding photographers were concerned, of how that business will have to change at least for the next 18 months, whether we like it or not. Because if we don't, we're going to see what they're all predicting about. I forget the percentage now from week 2, but the biggest percentage of professional wedding photographers are going to have to actually look for another job or give up wedding photography as a full-time profession. So we've got to really now prioritize on what our strengths are and what we can physically be doing, and stop procrastinating, as well as stop identifying the kind of the things that are least important. Are people going to be spending money with us? Remember, I'm asking questions at this point, and I'll give you my answers at the end, okay? Will people be spending money on photography? Perhaps they won't be spending as much money. Perhaps they'll be spending with a little bit more thrift. Perhaps they're going to be looking at spreading payments more. Perhaps those who are looking to spread payments more cannot spread payments anymore because they won't get the likes of interest-free credits and so on because of a change in their circumstances and so on. And as far as what will clients spend their money on is going to be the key thing. At present, if people could visit a photographic studio and go through a shoot, they would actually be spending as strong as ever before. Why? Because there's nothing else they can spend their money on. In Wales today, they've opened up all the garden centres. So we still can't drive somewhere like they can in England from Wednesday, I believe, to a beauty spot and sunbathe or travel to and go for a walk. We still can't do that in Wales. We are still technically locked down. But what we can do is they've opened up the garden centres now because they feel it's good for our well-being. Now, if you hate your garden as much as me, the least thing I think of is going to a garden centre, no matter what. So for me, they can stay closed for life as far as I'm concerned. But I also understand there are people out there who are passionate about their gardens and they like growing stuff. I always said another word then, but they like growing stuff, and I get it. It's okay, but it's just not me. So for them to announce last week that, yay, garden centres are going to be opening, I'm going, when are my studios are going to be opening? That's really what I want to do, because let's face it, I can bring them into a space and I'm going to be 2 meters away from them. That means I have no problem, really, as long as I can conform into government guidelines, with the exception, of course, is that businesses are technically still closed. That's where we need that green light, as it were, to actually say we can specifically open up. And at this point in time, that message has not come out from within the UK government at all. So it means our doors have to be closed, whether we like it or not, within things really. But when we get the opportunity for them to actually come in, are we ready for them? And are we ready at the pricing and the packages that they're ready for and things really? Are we going to be able to sell in the same way? Are we going to be able to actually make as much money from them? Will they buy us freely? Those are questions you have to ask yourself, because remember, everything is all about the discussion about, is it worth staying open here? That's really what we're looking at. Time's never been our friend. This is absolutely mind-blowing for me. The average person checks their phone 150 times a day. No wonder Debbie put in place that people, team, staff, are not allowed to actually have their phones on their desk during the course of the working day. Because when I start to actually see these facts here, the average time spent on a task before interruption is 1 minute and 15 seconds. Now, Jay would say under a normal time, that's about the gap I leave before I ring him. But as far as the distraction is concerned, it isn't a distraction from somebody interrupting them, but it's the interruption of time away from the task. So this is kind of mentally now, how am I going to change the business model to be back to somewhere where it was? In other words, I'm not going to get, because I've had all this time to actually be social online, check up what others are doing, perhaps do a bit of education, watch films on the Photographer Academy and so on. How am I going to refocus my brain back on the task at hand? This is the biggest question. And can I do that long term? Because I think the average person checking their phone 150 times a day is an example of just trying to take your head away from the task at hand. So in other words, I'm not even on about a phone now, but there's some of you who will allow yourself to get distracted by the stupidest, silliest things. And then when we see that it takes more than 25 minutes on an average to resume a task after being disrupted, at times I have a team member come into my office and go, Mark, can you have a look at this for me? And I go, not now, can you come back in 10 minutes? And basically, if this is the case, I should be saying come back in 25 minutes, because what I really can't do is take that distraction. In fact, as soon as they say, Mark, can you have a look at this for me now? If it's urgent, it's a different thing. But if it's not, how do we basically start to actually re-educate our minds into focusing in on the task ahead? And I would say that many of you who've taken too much time out during these past 7 weeks really need to start to train the brain as of today. You need to start to actively look at focusing in on the small tasks and complete those tasks as quick as you can without any other distraction. I'm not sure if you've heard me say in the past, but I have no phone Saturdays as a rule, where if we're going out, Debbie and I basically leave my phone behind. There is a funny tale to that. When I basically went to fill up the van with air pressure, and I couldn't find where the air pressure was in the van. Of course, I didn't have my phone, so the Mercedes garage was just down the road from where I was. So I whipped in there, and basically I got the pressure of the tires that I needed. And then at the same time, the sales guy I bought the van from some 9 years beforehand said, Mark, how's it going? Everything else, Pip? You ready to change that van yet? Because I got a great deal for you. And I bought a van. So there are things that I only went for tire pressures, and I got distracted by a sales guy, and he didn't do the sales job. It's just we've been meaning to change the van for such a long time, I went, do you know what? This is the right time to do it. Let's do it now. Let's discuss it. I'll get the figures. I'll get in touch with the boss, i.e. my wife. So what do you think, Deb, with it? He said, oh, don't panic. I'll give you a shout with the figures on Tuesday and make up your mind. I said, well, I'm going on tour for a week. He said, give me a shout when you get back. And if you do the deal, we'll do that. And it's those distractions, but it's also the task at hand. How do you get that done? That's the question that you have to be able to actually really being able to focus in now. And when we start to kind of look at other things, then you go, oh my God, multitaskers experience a 40% drop in productivity across the board. I just couldn't believe it because I prided myself on multitasking as often as I can. But in fact, to see that figure, you go, I actually get that. It means if I stop getting distracted, what we just saw a minute ago, by those other little things, and I concentrate on the job now, I'm going to get it done and finished. It takes 50% longer to accomplish a single task. If we're multitasking, it blew my mind. But then I kind of go into my head and I go, well, I get it. That's why perhaps there are times when I say, I can't do it now, can you come back in 10 minutes? Because in fact, I'm going to be able to finish my task at hand in less than 10 minutes. So come back and I'm yours to do. A couple of weeks ago, we were doing a workflow hour for the experience group. And they all go on to me that basically, you know, I say we can edit. So from the shoot, you download the images. So in other words, the cull, the selection, the finishing, and basically getting it ready for the viewing at 95% the finished image, and at the same time producing a video slideshow, an app for the phone, and an album design can all be done within an hour. They go, no, you can't do with it. Well, unfortunately, in jail, back me up on this, I did it in 65 minutes because I pressed a few buttons by mistake, and it took me a little while to actually shut the software down. But hey ho. But focusing on that task at hand, don't get yourself distracted. I once took the Mickey out of somebody because he came in the car with me for 4 hours on the way to Scotland, hitching a lift as a photographer onto one of my events. And he asked the question, so what music do you listen to while you edit? I went, what? What? You haven't got a chance to listen to music while you edit? How can you listen to music and focus on the images at the same time? And perhaps this is what I was trying to get at, and I haven't let him live this down to this day, in fact. But if you then look at the multitaskers, they also make up to 50% more errors. Those three things alone, when we start to actually look at the new business for you and actually how you restart, perhaps this is a complete new time for us to go, I'm going to change me. I'm going to change me in the way that I work, and I'm going to change me in the way that I have procedures in place. Because if I'm going to make this decision to stay alive after this pandemic, as far as the business is concerned, sorry, bad use of words there. But really what we're trying to achieve here is, can I be more efficient than I was before? Because probably I'm going to need to be. Why? Because I might have less staff. I might have to have more clients who are spending a little bit less money. So what I can't do is procrastinate about anything, and I've got to make sure that we're on task at hand. Okay, so coming to our end of questions, a few more things. So the warning signs I would say to you, if you're looking to the business, whether you're going, oh, you know what, I'm sure the warning signs are out there for me and I really need to close down my business now. So let's look at the kind of the top 7 that is usually applied to a business analysis on a business that is failing and about to actually shut its doors and things really. The first one, without a doubt, you can't hit your cash flow plans. It's very good saying, yes, I'm basing my business on 5 sessions a day, 5 days a week on a £400 spend. But the reality is, if you hit it in 2 days a week and you're only doing 3 sessions a day, your business basically can't afford you, because everything was based on that 5-5 principal, let's say. So the cash flow will never ever catch itself up, no matter what. And having your doors closed for 3 months is another thing that is going to actually kind of really chuck all the kind of the cash flow away. But we've got to actually look at that dynamic. So if you can't hit the cash flow, if you haven't been able to hit the cash flow at hand in the past year, let's say, how is Business Next going to be able to hit the new cash flow? So this is perhaps changing the whole concept of you and your business now into you and your business next. Actually going, the only way for me to stay afloat is if I do this, this, and this. And by doing that, I can pretty much guarantee an income of X. So I'm going to focus in on that before I actually look at kind of expanding the business role anymore, expanding the amount of sessions per week and so on. But the cash flow is all based on the X times Y equals Z principle. X sessions times Y days equals Z average. So in other words, that's really what we're looking to actually achieve. And then in the same way, X amount of sessions spending Y the amount of money equals the total turnover within the business, which if then things are looked at in a real structured way, you can identify how much profit is in there within the business that you need to hit to actually maintain the business itself. Another reason for watching out for one of the 7 signs is how the business is affecting your health. I would say that at present, this is a really, really bad time to allow anxiety, frustrations, that knotted pit in your stomach, kind of come into this 7-point worrying stage. In other words, the signals to close the business down. Why? Is because we are in exceptional circumstances. So I would encourage you to take the businesses affecting your health out of the mix in the decisions whether you're going to actually stay open or not with it and things really. We talked about in session 1, didn't we, taking time, taking you time, taking a little bit of almost meditation time to actually allow yourself to breathe and think and just put things in their kind of little pigeonholes and so on. But in the reality, in the normal world of 7 things to analyze to shut your business down, one of those would be health. And if it is at present extreme, then obviously you need or might need to actually use that as one of the reaction points in making that decision. You've fallen out of love with your baby. I can categorically tell you at some stage in your career, you will guaranteed fall out of love with your baby in some way. And I don't mean your partner or one of your kids. We do that naturally. But I'm on about the business. And I always talk about the business being the baby. Why? Because I often talk about nobody likes their baby to be called ugly. But the reality is, you know, when somebody shows you their child, you go, oh, glad it's not mine. That's the same as the business. You look at it through real, honest eyes, and you're able to make that judgment based on what you're seeing in front of you, and not what the dream product is within here. So if your baby looks beautiful in your head and your heart, you need to actually get out in front of you and start to actually look at the mechanics. In other words, look at all the figures, look at actually the amount of sessions, look going backward to the cash flow element and things really. But it's probably more that you've fallen out of love because you've got more into the business side than you have in the photography. Because when you get into photography, you think, right, I'm going to do 80% being a photographer, and that includes all the the Photoshop stuff and all that kind of thing. And then going to be 20% a businessman, woman. And the reality is you're probably going to be 80% in business and 20% being a photographer and all the other things. And you can be an ostrich and start to actually bury yourself in editing and everything else. But the reality is the longer you take on editing, the longer you do all that, you're hiding yourself away, knowing that basically you should be concentrating more on your baby to get back in love with it. I was lucky that when I retired in 2001, I was still doing about 30 weddings a year, and between a soft week was about 3 sessions and a busy week was 5 sessions, compared to as the whole team doing 100 weddings a year and 1,000 sessions plus the commercial business. And the reality is that until I retired, I forgot how much I loved it, how much I love photography. And I began to pick up a camera for fun again. And that's something well worth to acknowledge within yourself, that you should start to actually look at photography as being your fun and your passion again. So like I said last week, and I did again on the photo critique, but start to pick up your cameras when you go for a walk and start to take some photographs of things that we used to when we were amateur photographers, when we were just doing it for fun. Try and reignite the photography passion within you, because I need you to be the best photographer you can ever be in this next 18 months to 2 years, if we are going to actually make that business kind of really come alive again and things. It's also a trigger point when you start to realize, in fact, and it's horrible to think of, but clients perhaps don't love you as much as you love it. So in other words, they don't love your photography as much as you love your photography. And for many photographers, it's really hard to acknowledge. And we have had it through the likes of photo critiques in the past. You know, a critique, I'm not passing judgment in any way. I'm giving you honest advice how to move the photograph to the next level. But we have had photographers over the years who've actually submitted to a photo critique and then kind of got precious about their image. And the problem is then they're not really willing to actually see a different point of view. And the one thing that this time when the business has been closed, you've probably been looking at lots and lots of images, and you've been looking at your photography, and you've been perhaps doing a bit of training, and you're going, how do I do it like they do it? And the first thing is stop doing it in the way that you are doing it, because obviously if you can see the difference anyway, what you've got to do is pick up the new skill sets. And as a pro photographer, especially as a pro film photographer, our job was to hit the nail on the head every single shot we took, not take a dozen shots to get one or 20 shots to get one. Every single image on the roll of film needed to be a sellable image. So this is probably the time for you to actually look at your photography and just actually compare it to others and just say, okay, if I need to raise my game and I need to actually fall back in love, I need a different direction to what we're doing. Another signal to the business about to close, in fact, is when staff don't stay very long, or they're leaving. There are times when obviously people have been with you for quite a while and it is time for them to go. I've got to be honest, I'm not the easiest guy to work for. Jay will absolutely agree with that. But that's because I come to work every day with a passion, and a passion to make it better for everybody in my team and for every one of my clients, no matter what type of client they are, whether they're a photographer in training, whether they're an experienced studio with it, or whether they're a client having photographs done. I fully believe that, you know, the photograph I'm going to take could be the last photograph they're ever going to take. And basically, in the same way, when staff join me, it's my job to help them be better than they are in real life. If I don't encourage them, if I don't push them, then basically I can't leave a stamp on them to actually go, do you know what, Mark Cleghorn was a horrible guy to work for. I don't think anybody can really say that. But Mark Cleghorn was a horrible guy to work for, but boy, did he push me. Look at where I am today because of it. And those are things. So another one of those triggers to actually say whether the business is on the verge of shutting down is basically you're either having to get rid of them, or they're starting to leave by themselves and things, or they're just not staying around. Another way, in fact, the sleep mode is basically, or technically, what we're in. So in other words, putting the business down for weeks or months or even years and allowing the business to restart itself. So as a rule, the sleep mode within a business as a trigger means that if you can't put it down, okay, and forget about it, or basically allow it to go completely to sleep, and then you can actually re-pick it up in 6 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever it would be, that is a sleep-in zone, and that sleep-in zone, often referred to as the sleep mode, is where you ignite a business. If you can reignite a business now, the answer on the left-hand side, you've hit it. In fact, if you can reignite that business to start it fully out of sleep mode in the next 6 to 8 weeks, you will basically know that your business can restart and your business possibly has a long term. If you're going to keep going back to old ways of marketing and old ways of photography, basically the business itself will soon collapse. It's the sleep mode, putting it down, allowing it to go completely dormant, as what we've been made to do over these past couple of months, and now is a chance for you to actually address that. Then we'll just quickly finish on these, if you don't mind, and then we'll take some questions. Jay, sorry, I've overrun, mate. The first things would be is don't be a procrastinator. We've talked about that quite a lot over the weeks and years. Take action on your ideas straight away. Manage your time efficiently. Don't stay in your comfort zone. You took the risk of being self-employed. Not everyone can do it or remain as a self-employed person. It's okay. And being self-employed has never been a quick way to make money. We're going to be addressing all of this on the next session anyway, but we've got to kind of address those now, because as a part of, is it worth to stay in business after this pandemic has gone? Yes, it is. My answer to you is yes, it is. If you can honestly track backwards through these couple of slides that we've been looking at, and you can put tick boxes next to things. If you find that when you track back through this recording that you haven't been able to answer many of the questions in a yes mode, your business is probably on the verge of closing itself down, and you might not be able to survive. You might not be able to pay yourself as much money in the next 3 months, but you will be paying yourself a salary as long as we're looking at the profit. If we don't look at the profit, it means that the long term, the business will not survive, and that's what we have to look at. So really where we're trying to actually focus in on now is how and what do we need to do to make money in the next 3 to 6 months within photography to show that the business is solid and I can survive, and fingers crossed we'll be able to unravel that a little bit on the next session, either the more. Okay, Jay, that's me as far as the presentation is concerned, mate. What do you want to chat about?
We don't have a load of questions. We did have a few, but you answered them. But I've hung on to a couple, and we have had some inquiries about learning a little bit more about the experience group. I know we're not doing a hard sell for it at the moment, but I'm sure you want to just touch on that for a second. Let's just get through the question panel. So obviously we're looking to the future. We've been talking about that. When you're making the plan, how far ahead would you be looking? The question was 6 months, 12 months, longer. What's your best advice there?
Okay, so like I was saying to you, I reverse engineer stuff. So I'm usually looking at a 5-year, then I come back at the 3-year, then I come back at the 12-month plan, and then I break it down into each month. So probably for you moving forward from this now, with obviously all my business experience running different types of businesses over the year, but all in photography, the first thing that I would do is manage it week by week. So in other words, I would suggest that you start at Christmas, when you shut down again officially, let's hope it's not before then, but then you reverse backwards. So we start to actually look at Christmas, and then we look at November and October and so on. And then once you've addressed the longer term issues, even though it's 6 months, I obviously need you to get to the end of the year now, because this is a extraordinary circumstance that we're in. Once you've sorted out your 6 month, then you can go back to it and start to look at the 1-year plan beyond Christmas, which will give you an 18-month plan basically. Then obviously the 3-year, and then obviously the 5-year. But unusually for me, I'm suggesting that you look at the immediate rather than the long term. We do have a 6-week kind of start plan for things to do. within the experience group. And if people actually went backwards to the original 6-week plan, they would be able to actually restart the businesses as fast as they want to. But because many of the experience group have already done the 6-week plan with us, of course, we can look at the future more advanced than perhaps some of you can.
Where am I? Okay, so you this come up in your presentation. A few people asked, do you think, this is your idea, that there will be money to be spent again? I think you've already answered that, really. Don't know if you just want to recap it.
Yes, there will be money being spent.
The last question, apart from experience questions that I've got, your thoughts and ideas about doing offers for key workers?
I would suggest not.
Do you want to expand on that?
If you think that the key workers, okay, let's look at it a different way. If you were looking to do a special towards just the NHS, the answer is definitely no. It should be across all things. I believe this is not going to be a time for offers. This is a time where obviously we need people coming through. If you are truly using the key workers as a route to income, I think that is bad taste, because they've worked their asses off, even though they've all got great salaries. Basically, if you're just using them as an excuse, that is a bad human being. If you want to be a good human being, basically you give stuff for free, and that is it. As far as an offer is concerned, I don't believe that is a good thing. I know that many are doing it on marketing, and I understand why, but it's usually because they don't have any other route to market and they don't know what else to do. So it's lazy marketing again. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think, with the exception of a couple of questions about experience, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about, that's all I've got for you, mate.
Okay. This is the first week, in fact, that I've kind of got a presentation about the experience for you. But before I do that, can I just remind you about the Academy Big Photo magazine that is out now and things. You can download that from the Photographer Academy website. Remind you about Nigel is on tomorrow at 12 o'clock. No, he's not, he's 5 o'clock. And then basically Simon is in on Friday doing his session, his part 2 of lighting, and basically he's on at 12 to 1 o'clock and things really.